Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Wild, Wild Death, the show where we talk about all the ways people joined the chorus of angels in the Old West. Each week, we spin the wagon wheel of untimely demise, and whatever manner of death it lands on, we tell you a story about it. My name is Jack James Busa.
I'm Leslie Sidali.
And I'm Susan Busa-Leshner.
I know you guys are ready to hear a story, so let's get started right away.
Leslie, will you pretty please spin the wagon wheel of untimely demise, and let's see what we're going to talk about today.
Here we go. Today, it looks like we're hearing a story about death by hanging.
Very traditional for the Old West.
Classic. Yeah.
Classic indeed.
Here we go.
In 1863, gold was found in Alder Gulch, Montana. This discovery attracted fortune hunters and outlaws into the region, including a quiet man with a limp, who accidentally stumbled into history and became a Montana legend long after he was dead. This story is called The Shoemaker. Growing up in Massachusetts, George Lane was an average kid, but he did have one defining feature. He was born with a clubfoot.
Now, a clubfoot happens when a baby is born with their foot twisted inward and pointed downward, causing the sole of the foot to face sideways or even upwards due to abnormally short tendons in the foot, making it appear deformed. Now, today, it's possible to fix a clubfoot, but in the 19th century, it was not. So George grew up with a pronounced limp and the nickname Clubfoot George that stuck with him all of his life.
Aww.
But the limp didn't stop him from following his dreams. Inspired by the stories of gold and instant wealth coming from California, in the early 1850s, George left Massachusetts and headed west in search of his fortune.
All right.
He didn't have a lot of money, so as he traveled across the West, Lane worked odd jobs such as farm work and clerking at a store. But George always seemed to run into trouble. More than once, he was accused of running off horses, which is really just another way of saying that George was a horse thief. In 1862, he was sentenced to hard labor in Idaho for horse thievery. Hard labor is especially difficult for a man with a limp, but it's way better than being hung. Then, in 1863, he was accused of stealing a horse again. But this time, Lane decided it was best to get the hell out of town before the law could bring him in. So gold had just been found in the Montana Territory, and George headed for the boomtown of Virginia City, Montana. You will not be surprised to hear that when an area becomes boomtown with new people pouring in every day looking for gold, crime can get out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, that's a reoccurring theme.
Greed and then crime. That is what is happening when George Lane limped into Virginia City in the fall of 1863.
At that time, the area was plagued by road agents. Road agents were a group of bandits who would stop stagecoaches, wagons, and any traveler on the lonely roads between the gold camps. They would strip everyone of their possessions and would murder anyone who got in their way.
Damn.
Yeah, you're just trying to get from place to place with your stuff, and these dang road agents are always out there waiting to rob you.
So the biggest and most successful of the road agent bands was a gang known as the Innocents. The story goes that the gang got their name by whispering the secret code, "I am innocent,"
to identify themselves to other gang members.
Wow.
I personally find it hard to believe. I have a hard time with this one because it's pretty theatrical for a gang that has possibly murdered more than 100 men in the territory.
And then when they're trying to identify themselves to a fellow gang member, they're in a bar and they lean over and whisper, "I am innocent." I just don't think that makes any sense at all, but it's really funny.
Yeah, it's silly. It's sort of like in a teen novel,
Yeah.
and it's like thinking it's clever, but it's like kind of lame. Like, because the thing is, they're not innocent. It's opposite. Like, yeah, we get it.
The gang's leader was rumored to be none other than the sheriff of the nearby village of Bannock, a guy named Henry Plummer. Today, Plummer's actual involvement with the gang of road agents is a point of debate. Maybe he was involved, maybe he wasn't. But in 1863, many frightened miners were convinced the sheriff led a vicious band of thieves and killers. They were fed up with the crimes, the robberies, and the murders, and decided something needed to be done about it. Now, Montana was not yet a U.S. territory with courts or marshals, so this lack of formal law enforcement set the stage for citizens to take justice into their own hands. In other words, they became a group of vigilantes looking to catch and punish people who they suspected of crime.
But back in Virginia City, by all appearances, Clubfoot George Lane was living a respectable life.
He'd found honest work as a shoe and boot maker at Dance and Stewart's General Store, and was regarded by his employers as skilled, hardworking, and an honest craftsman.
There's some sort of irony going on there. There's something, but then it's sort of sweet. Like, regular shoes didn't quite fit him, so he decided to turn his life into something he could give to others. It's like a Disney movie, but with crime.
Okay, so he was working as a shoe and boot maker at this general store, but he also may have had an underground role as a telegraph man for the outlaws. In other words, Lane supposedly kept his ear tuned into information coming into Virginia City. So he would listen to what people were saying as they came into the store, passing along information about gold shipments or wealthy travelers so the road agents could ambush them.
He's always got his toe dipped into the crime scene.
Oh, so many puns about feet, so little time. All right. With all the crime going on, Virginia City and the surrounding gold mining camps were volatile places in late 1863. There was another road agent named George Ives,
who wasn't shy about being a member of this innocent road agent gang.
He was a really disagreeable bully who pushed people around and bragged about killing people and robbing and all of his crimes. But when Ives shot and killed an orphaned young man for a small amount of gold dust, that was finally the last straw.
Gosh.
The vigilantes banded together, sent out a posse to hunt Ives down, and then took him to nearby Nevada City for a public vigilante trial, after which they planned to immediately hang him.
Okay.
Hearing this, George Lane got on his horse and rode more than 70 miles from Virginia City to Bannock. His plan was to find Sheriff Plummer, tell him what was happening. Lane's goal, as he said, was to have Plummer, as a sheriff, demand a proper civil trial for Ives rather than a vigilante trial followed by a quick hanging. But Plummer wasn't in Bannock when he arrived, so Lane relayed his concerns to two of Plummer's deputies. He complained to them about the rise of vigilantism in Virginia City, and this turned out to be a really bad mistake.
Why?
Because the deputies found Lane's anti-vigilante sentiment suspicious and arrested him. The deputies, who were in fact secret members of the vigilante movement, accused Clubfoot George of being a road agent, a thief, and an accessory to numerous robberies and murders on the highway.
Oh, so there's sort of mob mentality too.
It seemed to them that by writing to warn Plummer, Lane had revealed his ties, or at least his sympathies, to the outlaw gang. Lane did not resist, but as the vigilantes hauled him back to Virginia City to face vigilante justice, Lane protested his innocence, saying, "If you hang me, you will hang an innocent man." At this point, the vigilantes had gotten organized, and they named themselves the Vigilance Committee of Alder Gulch.
What a great name.
It sounds very official. The committee included dozens of respected locals, miners, merchants, and ranchers who were all determined to eradicate the road agent gang. On January 10th, 1864, Sheriff Henry Plummer and a couple of his deputies were captured and hung by vigilantes in Bannock. And I did hear a story about Henry Plummer getting hung. They hung him on the gallows he built for other people.
Whoa. We'll hang you in the gallows of your own making.
That's it. So, after Plummer was hung, the committee turned its attention to Virginia City. They already had Clubfoot George Lane in custody, and they drew up a list of other suspected road agents in the area, which included notorious figures like Boone Helm, Jack Gallagher, Frank Parrish, and Hayes Lyons. So just a sidebar, all of these people are terrible, especially Boone Helm. Boone Helm was known as the Kentucky Cannibal because he was a cannibal.
Oh my.
The Vigilance Committee had had enough, and they decided it was time to finish the job. On the night of January 13th, 1864, they voted to arrest the men on their list the very next morning. Before daybreak on January 14th, 1864, several vigilante posses fanned out across Virginia City and made the arrest. All of the prisoners, including George Lane, were quickly escorted to an unfinished log building on Wallace Street that was under construction. Because inside, there was a stout crossbeam in the ceiling that would make a perfect gallows for a hanging. A vigilante trial was convened, but the trial was really just for show, and they had a lot of people that showed up for that. Because you know how hangings are super popular to go visit, as we all know.
Yeah, something to do.
So as the trial was going on, some locals kind of really weren't sure that Lane was guilty. After all, he had lived a relatively upstanding life in town. And Lane even appealed to his employer, Mr. Dance of the general store, asking him to vouch for his character. Dance admitted that while George had been an honest worker, he could not speak to his activities outside of work, and the evidence of Lane's outlaw connections was rather strong. I think Dance saw which way the wind was blowing with the crowd.
It's really his ties to outlaw activity isn't great, but does he deserve...
If it's true, if it's even true.
But, yeah, you're right, if that is true. And more to the point of what he was saying, he was like, hey, this vigilante behavior seems to be like a little out of control. People should have fair trials. And they're like, hilarious you say that, George. Fair trial? Well, we're not going to do that too. We're going to hang you for even questioning it. It's really sort of messed up.
Right, that's exactly what it looks like. Yeah. At the same time, he could have been, with the gang.
I love how you two are giving everybody the benefit of the doubt.
And Leslie's like, hang him. Just hang him. Wait, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards where there's smoke, there's fire.
Even so, everybody in the United States of America, we should all get a fair trial.
Well, Montana wasn't a state yet.
Okay.
Back to the quote-unquote trial. George Lane realized that nothing he was going to do was going to save his neck, so he requested his employer to pray with him. The employer agreed, and he knelt beside Lane and another one of the condemned men named Jack Gallagher to offer a final prayer for mercy. Then the vigilantes fixed nooses around the 5 prisoners' necks. Lane remained calm as the rope was placed over his head, and as he kind of got up on the stand, he noticed that one friend had come to see the execution, and Lane waved at him and said, "Goodbye, old fellow, I'm gone." In a final act of independence, George Lane did not wait for the vigilante executioner to shove him off the makeshift scaffold. Instead, he leaped off the box himself and ended his own life.
Wow.
Took control of the situation.
Yeah, imagine that, though. That's a pretty ballsy thing to do.
Well, I sort of get it. Just like, you know what?
I do too, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting around
no
for
way out.
this. There's no way out. I've accepted it. See you later.
In this moment, I'm ready, so here I go.
I'd feel
Mhm.
like, damn, if I just stayed home and not like rode 70
gone out,
miles.
yeah.
Like, and by the way, I was trying to do like a nice thing. You guys are so rude.
Well, if that's what he was doing.
I know. It's like, what the hell?
He could have been, trying to warn him that danger was imminent. Both of those things could have been true. Anyway, the rest of the men were hanged,
And soon 5 bodies were swinging from the beam in the half-built storehouse. After a few hours, it was clear that no relatives or friends were going to step forward to claim the remains. So, the vigilantes hauled the 5 bodies up a barren, windswept hill overlooking Virginia City. The men were interred in shallow, unmarked graves, and boards were placed over them to protect them from scavenging animals.
and that should have been the end of it.
Oh, no.
But it never is.
It never is.
The
What
violent days
What they
of
do, like dig them up and make them into marionettes? Like
Hey,
at this
don't try to guess. Don't try to guess. Don't try to guess.
Is that it? Did I guess? Sorry.
As the years passed, the violent days of 1864 became stories told around campfires and in saloons. Virginia City itself dwindled from a booming town to a quieter community. In 1907, curiosity got the better of a group of Virginia City residents who realized that no one was entirely sure which outlaw was buried in the graveyard now called Boot Hill. And there was only one way to find out. What do you think it is?
They dug him up.
Dig 'em up.
Right. The graves were still unmarked, and you couldn't tell who was what. So, they were eager to definitively identify and perhaps, settle some bets about who was where. The group got the help of an aging former vigilante who remembered where the bodies were buried. Now, this is like 40-something years later.
Wow.
So, were they just hoping that there was a wallet? How are they? No DNA.
Well, that's way
Right,
before
I know,
that,
yeah.
right?
Oh, okay. All right. They weren't hoping to identify them.
They just wanted to know where they were.
Okay.
So they got this guy who remembered where the bodies were buried, and the townsfolk grabbed some shovels and followed the old guy up to Boot Hill. And he pointed out where he recalled the bodies were buried, and everybody started digging.
I would literally never do that. If someone was like, hey, what are you doing on Friday? We're all gonna just like grab our shovels and go up to Boot Hill and dig up these like dead guys. I'd be like, no?
Imagine that they're archaeologists. They'd be fine then.
Yeah, but we're not. We're like whiskey drinking Montanans.
Well, yeah, that's true. But here's what happened when the people who were there, who said yes, went up to Boot Hill. They started digging, and guess what? They were in the right place.
That's nice.
They dug up a body with a recognizable feature. A mummified human foot that was twisted and deformed. So 43 years after the hanging, George Lane's corpse was instantly recognizable by his clubfoot, which had been partially preserved in the dry Montana soil. So they were pretty excited about this. Yay.
Whoa.
This is him, right? So they decide, let's have a souvenir.
No.
And they chopped up Lane's clubfoot.
No.
The rest of his skeleton was reburied, and wooden headstones were placed on all the graves. But the severed foot, which was essentially skin and bone dried into a natural mummy, was kept as a trophy. Eventually, the foot was given to the Thompson Hickman Museum in Virginia City and placed under a glass dome. They even had other personal items linked to Lane, which was reportedly his walking cane and a straight razor he once owned. Why somebody would keep all that, I don't know. For more than a century, Clubfoot George's foot remained one of the museum's most famous and talked about exhibits. The foot became such a staple of local lore that it was even featured in travel guides and roadside attraction lists. This is why you should go to Virginia City.
So the dome that they have the foot in, I just want to break this down.
Well, everybody should know that there's a picture and it's in the link.
The
So
picture's
that's
in
what
the
we're talking
show
about.
link, so go click on it and then listen to what I'm saying. First of all, it looks like a dog treat, like something you like a pig ear
You're
dog
right.
treat situation, like something your dog chews on. Then they
Mm-hmm.
have it wrapped in some sort of
Burlap. It was burlap.
and then it's sitting on top of a head of lettuce. Like it looks like a display you'd have at a diner for a hamburger. I wouldn't know this was a foot. I would think this was a sculpture, an 8-year-old made.
You know what it looks like to me? And this is kind of awful, and I don't mean any disrespect, but it looked like a rack of lamb.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, yeah, it does.
It
Like
looks like
ribs.
something at a diner, have our foot. It's delicious.
Ugh.
It does look like ribs.
It looks like ribs. Anyway, it was there for a really long time, but in 2017, Lane's extended family got tired of all the jokes like we're making right now and requested that this remnant of their long-deceased relative be removed from display and laid to rest. So at first, the museum was like, nope, because the foot was one of their biggest attractions.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, they agreed to make a cast of George's foot and display that instead, and they turned over the real foot to Lane's relative. At the time of this recording, this was not very long ago, less than 10 years ago.
Whoa.
So the family opened their own roadside museum?
Yes, that's what they did. Aha! No, what they did was they took the foot and they had it cremated.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but my dark sense of humor is getting the best of me. They took the foot
And had it cremated. All right.
I would have kept the foot.
So their plan was to take the ashes to where George Lane was buried and scatter them on top of his grave so the ashes would sort of go back to the body, I guess.
That's nice.
Which is what they did.
Yeah.
On June 24th, 2017, the family had a respectful ceremony. And when it came time to scatter the ashes, I have read that they did have a little trouble opening the jar, holding the ashes.
Okay.
And hopefully the wind was not blowing.
Yeah.
But eventually, they were successful, and the ashes of George's clubfoot were scattered over the place where he was buried over 150 years later.
That's nice.
Yeah. The strange saga of Clubfoot George Lane has become one of Montana's most enduring frontier legends. Some view him and the others hanged by the vigilantes as villains who got their just desserts. Others suggest they might have been maybe not guilty people caught up in the overzealous fury of vigilante mob. All that said, this remains a vivid chapter in Montana's folklore and often cited as one of the state's weirdest tales, illustrating the thin line between law and lawlessness in frontier time. But the tale of Clubfoot George lives on. This cobbler with a limp turned possible outlaw has left an indelible footprint on history.
If you'd like to know more about this episode, check out the links in our show notes and follow us on social media at The Wild Wild Death. You can hear other episodes at thewildwilddeath.com or any place you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Adios, muchachis.
The Wild Wild Death is a production of 2222 Media.